You know how some phrases are so common you almost stop hearing them? You see them everywhere, on posters, in cards. But what if one of the most famous verses in the Bible is more than just a nice comfort? What if it's actually an instruction manual for how reality itself works? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today with Isaiah 41:10. And there it is. You've probably heard it 1,000 times. The words themselves are just so powerful, and they've brought comfort to people for thousands of years. But let's ask a different question. What if its real power isn't just in how it makes us feel, but in what it claims is actually true about the world? That's where we're headed. And that right there, that's the big question for our explainer today. What if fear not isn't just advice on how to handle an emotion? What if it's a direct command to correct a fundamental mistake in how you see the world around you? Let's dig in. So, to really get to the heart of this promise, we have to go back in time. We have to understand the crisis that it was born from. See, these words weren't whispered in a quiet library. They were basically shouted into the middle of a storm. I mean, just try to imagine it. Everything that makes you, your home, your country, your whole identity, is about to be completely wiped off the map. The people of Israel were living with these massive, terrifying empires breathing down their necks, facing the very real threat of losing it all. Their fear wasn't some vague anxiety. It was real, it was raw, and it was totally justified by what was happening. What's so powerful here is you can see the pressure building. You start with a stable kingdom, then this massive threat appears on the horizon. And right there at the absolute peak of that national panic, that's when Isaiah delivers this message. It's a promise designed not for the good times, but for the absolute worst of times. It literally became a lifeline for survival when they were eventually dragged off into exile. Okay, so with that intense historical scene set, let's get to the core of this. The English translation is amazing, for sure. But when you peel back the layers and look at the original Hebrew, well, a whole new level of meaning just explodes into view. It's much more radical than you might think. So let's start with fear not. The Hebrew is el tira, and this is key. It's not a gentle suggestion like, hey, maybe try not to be scared. No, it's a command. An absolute stop what you're doing kind of command. And the source argues it's a command based on objective reality. It's basically saying stop misreading the situation. Your fear is based on a false story. So why the command? Well, the verse immediately gives the reason. Hi ani imka, for I am with thee. Now that word with, im in Hebrew, it implies this incredibly close active companionship. This isn't some distant God watching from the cheap seats. It's a presence so close, it literally defines your reality and holds your very existence together. And this little detail, it changes everything. The verse doesn't just say, I am God. It says, I am thy God, Eloheka. That little thy makes it personal. We're not talking about some generic cosmic force anymore. We're talking about a God who is in a committed, binding, personal relationship with you. And when you put it all side by side like this, the difference is just staggering. Don't feel scared becomes stop misperceiving reality. God is out there somewhere becomes my intimate presence is your reality. And a vague, all-powerful being becomes this intensely personal God in a committed relationship with you. This is the game changer right here. Okay, so once you unlock that deeper meaning, the whole thing just clicks into place. It's a complete paradigm shift. And it forces us to ask, if the verse is a correction, what exactly is it correcting? Well, this is where we have to redefine fear itself. So, according to the source material, fear, at its very root, isn't just an emotion. It's a cognitive event. It's the perception of an absence. It's your brain recognizing a lack of something, a lack of safety, of money, of control. You're afraid because you perceive that something essential is missing. And here is the light bulb moment. If fear is the perception of absence, then God's promise of his intimate, sustaining presence is the direct, perfect correction. It's not just a comforting idea, it's a statement of what is fundamentally true, and it directly cancels out the perception of lack that's causing the fear in the first place. The source really doesn't pull any punches here. It puts it this bluntly. That feeling of dismay, that deep, soul-crushing despair, it's framed as a cognitive error. It's what happens when our minds ignore the fundamental reality that God's support is always, everywhere, holding things together. That completely reframes how we think about our own feelings of despair. This all sounds great, right? It's a fascinating way to look at it. But how do you actually use this?
How do we take this ancient promise and turn it into a practical tool we can use when we're freaking out about work or family? Well, the source gives us a really clear, actionable guide. It all boils down to this simple but incredibly profound 3-step routine. First, you identify it. Don't just swim in the anxiety. Name the fear. I'm afraid I'll fail this presentation. And then call it what it is, a misperception of lack. Second, you reframe it. This is the active part. This is where you actually use the verse, declaring God's presence as the true reality in that moment. You're not wishing, you're stating a fact. And third, you reinforce it. You make it a habit, building this new way of seeing into your mind through a daily routine. So why does this work? Because you're not just passively waiting for the fear to go away. You are actively retraining your brain to see reality correctly. You're essentially moving your anchor. You're taking it out of the shifting sands of your circumstances and dropping it onto the solid bedrock of that covenantal promise, Eloheka, thy God. You know, there's a line in the source material that just nails the whole point of this explainer. It says, this verse isn't just something to reflect on quietly. It's an operational manual, a guide for how to actually live in sync with the true fabric of reality under the steady hand of God. I just love that. So I'll leave you with a really practical question. Thinking about this whole framework, fear as a misperception and God's presence as the correcting reality, what's one specific fear in your life, big or small, that you're going to choose to reframe today?